now get to the topic of this day, where we are going to be discussing the 2024-2025 national budget that we passed as a country. But interesting in this, we want to look at the debt burden that we are facing as a country. We've always talked about this. Politicians have come up, various analysts have come up and talked about the debt burden. Now, when I look at the budgets of Uganda and Kenya, let me use dollars because we will have another East African country in here. When we look at the budgets, you find that Kenya passed a 31 billion US dollar budget. Uganda, if you're to go in dollars, we passed a 19.2 billion US dollar budget. But let's look at our public debt as of, for Kenya, as of 2020 to 2023. You'll find that Uganda, we had 86.78 trillion Uganda shillings that they were owing us to pay. Now, Kenyans had 10.278 trillion Kenyan shillings. I'll later let you know what now Uganda's debt burden stands at. But remember also a big chunk of our budget went into debt servicing. It's not bad to borrow, but what you use the money for and where you expect to get the money to pay back is the issue. Now join me, welcome my guest this morning, who happens to be to Mohe Hilda. She is the Debt and AIDS Officer at Siatin, Uganda. Now, these are people who make sure that they understand the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information Negotiations Institute. They look at trade very critical, but she's here and we'll get it from the horse's mouth. Most welcome to the show and a lovely morning to you.
Lovely morning to you and our dear viewers. We are glad to have you as well and also join us on this important discussion. And you know, it's very critical to follow our budget as citizens, but also the things that would actually affect budget implementation are also very crucial. And as civil society and citizens, it is very critical that, of course, we keep an eye and watch on government to tell them that here, I think we are going astray, but also say thank you for the good things that they are doing as the nation. I'm actually glad you started with thanking the police. I'm shocked. I'm shocked to hear that the police can actually respond so fast. And of course, now with the budget, if there's adequate funding for police, definitely yes, they will do far much better work. But maybe because you work on TV, that's why they came on timely. Probably they knew you'd talk about it next time on the show. No,
Ugandans, let's appreciate. Because I didn't know these people and they didn't know me at all. So I was just a Ugandan saying, please call this person, but I was very shocked. Wow. I also was like you. Actually, I never believed that they can. I had these stories of, they'll ask how many guns, how many are they, and all those, and they may become ours, but this is not what happened. Now, you mentioned as civil society in your introductory remarks. There is a word I liked, as civil society, we want to thank government. But you see, when we talk about the budget, it is a process. And in this process, civil society organizations are very much interested and are very much involved. But when finally the budget is done, we see you critique various aspects of this budget. Why do you exclude yourselves, yet actually in the baking, you are part and parcel?
Okay, thank you. There is a constitutional right of citizens having to participate in the national budget to contribute to what they call what are the priorities the budget should take. And oftentimes you see, I think the budget process starts around September with a budget consultative process whereby the Ministry of Finance does what they call the regional consultative meetings, but of course they have done the national budget conference earlier. So here they consult the various citizens in the various regions to ask them of the key priorities. Of course, government is not going to call the entire Uganda to come in the regional consultative meetings, but they call the representatives of the citizens. Of course, now here it would be the civil society, but also their community-based organizations and various stakeholders. And of course, several times we've come up to actually give proposals in the budget and what we feel the budget should look like in a given financial year. But why at the end tail sometimes we come out to say, or even in the middle, because it's not good to really come at the tail, and you're like, now you're critiquing what has already gone. Yeah, so we always see that some of the priorities, some of the proposals we've given to government not coming through as we proposed them. Of course, government also has several reasons as to why some of these are not coming up. Of course, financing is crucial, but also it's critical to know that there's what we call the National Development Plan and the vision we have as a nation. So whatever proposals we are supposed to give are supposed to be in this plan. Yeah, but now there are things that come up over the periods. I know when we're doing our Vision 2040, we had never known that we would ever have COVID. Yeah, but when it came, it really had a very significant impact on our financing as a nation. So, but of course now those are like a big wabitalas. Yes, but there are things that we can have control over as a nation that we've also not really put into play. Aspects of corruption, you know, poor project implementation, you know, arising from poor designs and all that. So as civil society, we can still come up. Civil society and the citizens really, because even civil society, it's not good to work in your own cocoon. You need to talk to the citizens and know what they really want. So increasingly, we see that there is a lot of participation at the tail end and at the start of the budget. I think this is also reflected in what we call the open budget survey that clearly shows that government has been transparent. I think this year we performed at 59%. Of course, this is still showing that insufficient budget information out in the public, but at least it is an improvement. And when you compare it to other nations, Uganda is doing well. But when it comes to public participation, the figures are alarming. We have about 14% public participation. And why usually is government failing to actually justify that they have consulted enough citizens or they have put in place their priorities, or if not, government has come out to actually explain to the citizens why certain things have not been put in play. Because what do you expect from citizens when it comes to the budget financing? They'll ask for things like health, financing, education, but also the road network should be crucial. And you see, when you look at our current state of roads, you actually wonder the trillions we borrowed in the around 2014-15, what the money was used to do, because some roads you can't really justify. Just look at the metropolitan Kampala. The roads are in poor state. Yet I remember during the budget reading for 23-24, we were assured that every vote or that deals with the roads would be given some money to actually repair the roads and do what. So here, of course, we cannot keep quiet and just sleep. And also you see the state of health, really dilapidated structures, but also police. Just look at where they sleep, and then we expect to just give them a phone call in the night and we expect them to come up, you know. So there are some of these things that as a nation we've not seen come through, yet we've seen a lot of money that we are losing as a nation to corruption, whereby you've seen the parliamentary exhibition, you know. I've seen MPs being tried, you know. So you keep on wondering, really, are we moving as a nation? Is it for God and my country, really, whereby we all have a heart for each other? Yeah, so back to the budget, really, that's why sometimes as civil society, we really come out to say, really, no, this is not
These
working.
proposals have not really been taken up, despite the fact of continuous participation.
Yes.
Well, there's one time I attended a budget conference, and this had political leaders. And to my disappointment, They came in huge numbers, I must say, but I never saw many understand properly the reason why they were there. And also their participation. It was more of when are we having break tea, when are we having lunch, and then when are we having allowances. And this is also common of you civil society. Do you do these things for a purpose? Is it for accountability? Is it to fulfill a process? Because sometimes these are critical issues, apart from the facilitators that are going to come. Many are there, they are there, then they sign and go home. And then later we talk about government not taking up proposals, government not maybe respecting these priorities here and there. Why do we see these tendencies more so within civil society?
Civil society, the civil society organizations that we've worked with, of course we work in a consortium with several others. We just don't do work to close the business.
You give us pens, notebooks, sometimes bags written on 2024, 2024, but the actual gist, then a small allowance. We go home and you ask, what was your participation? Actually,
now like Siatini, CS Bag, Uganda Debt Network, PSFU, and others, we've joined what we call the National Budget Month Partners. Yeah. So this is a consortium under the Ministry of Finance, where we aim to really give the budget visibility to the level that every Ugandan actually understands what is in the budget, what key projects are going to come up, what are we going to spend on in a given financial year, such that during the implementation phase, this is very critical. So like you're saying that we are just going to go back after the budget conference and we sleep. No, we are looking at the citizens to tell them that this is what is coming in your constituency, this is what is coming in your sub-county. Say for instance, if there are the seed schools, which seed schools are being taken up for financing in a given financial year, such that citizens come up to monitor these projects. At the end of the budget, then we assess. But still, we've given reports during implementation of the budget to come out and say that, you know what, this is not going on well as planned. So it ceases to be that we've done our work at the beginning of the budget and we are asleep. No, we come up to actually monitor, we do policy briefs, we meet with the ministries, yes, and luckily these days the Ministry of Finance usually issues a press release each quarter to show how the budget performance, but also to brief on the next releases. So here, civil society is also given chance to actually make a statement on what is not going well. It's usually like a Q&A. Also, the media is also invited. So if we do our part as civil society, we expect also government to respond positively. Or if they have not taken up the proposal, like I said, they should be able to justify the reason as to why certain things are not being done the way they want to be done. Yeah. So we are just not doing work for just, no, we follow the budget from right from the start to the tail end. And also we contribute to what we call the audit process. Today, the Auditor General issued out what we call the Citizens Feedback Platform, through which we give feedback on what areas we think the Auditor General should assess during the audit process. And of course, you cannot know which areas need audit if you've not followed the budget implementation from the start. So here, that also just helps us to really tell Auditor General and also guide on what we feel where monies have not been critically utilized. But also the audit report is not only full of the negatives. There are votes that have really performed well in terms of spending the money the way it has been, or even utilizing the money beyond spending, because you could spend on things that have not really been budgeted for. Yeah.
Now, for over 3 or 4 years, Minister for Finance, Honorable Matia Kasaija, has come out and said we shouldn't be alarmed by our public debt. This very budget, he didn't talk so much about the alarm, but he said the money we borrowed was put to proper use. As civil society organizations, Why the alarm then? Let's look at our current state of our public debt.
Okay, so why the alarm? You know, I think this time round when he was reading the speech, he actually alarmed. He was like, I'm tired. I'm tired. When we go to borrow, we look like young children, you know, something like that. It actually shows that there is a problem as a nation. When you look at our debt, I think Uganda was the first country to benefit from the HIPIC, that is the Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative of the World Bank and the IMF, where they gave debt relief to Uganda. But also we benefited from the multilateral debt relief that was around 2006, 2007, where they cancelled fully our debt for the multilaterals and bilateral creditors. I think our debt burden was reduced to about 3.1 billion USD, something like that. Yeah. So, but when you look at the trends, from that point when our debt,
appetite to borrow,
our debt was fully forgiven to date, what went wrong? Why do we need to alarm anyway? Is there a need to alarm? Is there a need to worry? And for us as civil society, we are saying yes. Why? Because when you look at the trend in the growing debt burden, you look at how debt grew between 2009 to date, yes, 2014, 2014-15, we had huge infrastructure projects like Karuma, where we also had infrastructure projects like the roads. You know, government really invested a lot of money. When you look at those budgets for those years, I think transport, it used to be transport and something sector. It used to take a very large part of our budget. And we actually saw government taking very many investments, like large investments. But increasingly, these investments were not, the debt was not acquired from our traditional creditors that used to lend us at fairer terms, what we call the concessional finance, where, of course, this has a large grant component of about 35% and above. The loan has a grant component. But, of course, this was really not available to finance all these projects. So government opted to borrow from non-concessional creditors. Those are, of course, the Chinese, the commercial banks. This, I'll give a brief on that in the current times. And, of course, these loans come with higher interest rates, better terms, whereby I think we've increasingly seen an influx of Chinese. They'll come in with their own equipment. They want to employ their own people. So where do we benefit as a nation? Because we have a large unemployment rate, yes. But imagine if you go to the people, our people, that are dying in the slums of Kampala, even in the outskirts of the city, and you have them employed on some of these roles on the road, you know, like, it really beats our understanding as civil society. And increasingly, we've seen Auditor General coming to raise a flag on various loan projects that have not really performed well. I'll give an example. In the last audit report, there was what we call the Muzizi Power Project. I think government even had to cancel this date, yes, and cancelling a loan because government had went into this contract in about 2018-19, and to date, there's nothing that was remitted, or very little was remitted. So it had to attract commitment fees for over that period of time. Now, after contracting, after having to accumulate commitment fees, then you come to cancel. Even cancellation comes with a fee. But also it impedes on our international relationship, whereby creditors will be like, Uganda, those ones will cancel that debt.
It's a risk venture.
Yeah, it's a risk venture. In the middle of implementation, they will have to, you know, to change their mind. But when you critically analyze why, the reason as to why some of these projects are being cancelled, it's either because of poor design, poor project planning, where some of these have not undergone what we call the feasibility analysis, or any other processes in the what we call the public investment management
So Hilda,
system.
to get you right here, borrowing is not bad.
No, not at all.
But two things. The source where you're going to get the money to borrow.
And the terms.
The terms.
And the utilization.
And the utilization.
Yes.
So where are we going wrong?
Like I've clearly said, we've gone wrong on most of these stages.
So for us, all stages?
Yes, of course there are debts we've contracted. Like in the last audit report.
First, let's understand
Yeah.
When we are going to borrow, are we borrowing for priorities?
Yeah, of course, there are loans that have been borrowed based on what we call, as you move in as I noted that we have a vision as Uganda,
Yes.
which is implemented through the 6 national development plans. Now, each development plan clearly spells out the projects that should be undertaken in a given period of time. But also, like I noted, there are things that come up during either the plan implementation or a given financial year, like I mentioned, COVID. There's no way we would start saying government don't borrow for vaccines, yet we've not really paid enough tax to buy vaccines, you know. So the government will still have to borrow, but where are you borrowing and for what use? And have you actually critically planned to actually get this money? Are you ready to receive this money as a nation? You know, so that is what really matters.
Do you think we still have alternatives as Uganda for where to borrow from or not?
The recent Moody's report tells us that we are limited. We are a bit limited
the
and constrained.
concessional loans, you have longer time, they're very friendly, but I don't think with our debt burden and our history, we are still attractive for many of these loans.
And beyond being attractive, even the availability of such
Yes,
financing
definitely.
may not be possible. So, of course, government has to go for the private financing or from any other lenders. But we have what we call the public debt management framework. That clearly spells out on principles of borrowing. From whom are you borrowing and for what venture? There is what we call the social projects like health, education. Of course, the framework tells us that government will prioritize concessional financing for such developments, but also projects that require a lot of financing and they will have a larger return on investment compared to the interest charged on the loan. Government will go for the private financing or the non-concessional financing. So the framework clearly spells out, but also the framework goes ahead to say that government will not borrow like from some instruments that are highly risky, like the Eurobonds we've seen in Kenya, and we've seen how these have affected their economy. And government still saying that for us as Uganda, we shall not borrow. And indeed, at least for that, we haven't seen. But at least we've seen a number of syndicated loans coming up, government borrowing from various commercial banks. And there's a whole chain of banks, you know, this one borrows from this, then the money eventually comes to government. And unfortunately, some of this money has been used for recurrent expenditure, like to spend on wages and non-wage, of course, which is also important. But the framework clearly says that such borrowing will only be for projects that have a high return on investment, like infrastructure projects, yeah? But then you've borrowed this money and you've used it to pay the wages, or you've used it to pay the non-wage. Of course, non-wage has the component that supports, like say for instance, if it's a hospital, yeah, you will have the wage where you're paying the workers, those are the doctors, but also the non-wage could be maybe like, what do we call it? Not really refurbishing, but maybe say if it is a school, money for slashing, the compound, like smooth running of work in a
operational costs.
Operational costs, something like that. But why are you using a syndicated loan, you know, for such? Are we going to have a high return on investment? How are we going to pay back this money? When you look at our tax to GDP as a nation, it is below the thresholds that are required for developing countries. We are about 12.8, even when government committed in the domestic revenue mobilization strategy that would increase this by 0.5 every financial year. We've not seen this being actualized.
Very true.
Yes. So as a nation, you ask yourself, even sometimes you look at government and you wonder where they would actually get the resources, okay, to make all the other factors constant. If there's no corruption, you know, still the money wouldn't be adequate to
for a long
finance
time. We've borrowed in the name of infrastructure development. And when we talk about infrastructure development, the rate of return sometimes is over a long period.
Yeah.
When you construct a road, leave alone that it's leading to a mine, it's leading to a landing site. Now, like when we have what we've termed the oil roads, you know that definitely this is money that is going to flow in. we have roads that are politically driven or motivated. Some people wake up and say, if you're not going to work on a road, we are not going to
pass the budget.
To vote. You know? Okay. Someone becomes a member of parliament, a minister, maybe somehow a road is done in that area. Hospitals, when you borrow, yes, we need to treat our people. So this issue of infrastructure, for over time, I think it's now that we are focusing on all of human capital development, which is good. But infrastructure, our borrowing, how best can we make use of these loans? One would say, for me, I believe the Entebbe Express, I learned from Exim Bank of China, when someone says, contribute to this road when you use it, that is a bit sense to me. But I think it can't be all over the country. So how best can we ensure that the money we borrow for infrastructure development, we are able to pay this and we have the best decisions and best way, because that's where we are acquiring so many loans and debt is increasing.
Okay. So I think you've even said it, you've answered the question yourself.
That sector of infrastructure, whenever I see it.
Where you're saying that some loans are politically driven, even when it comes to projects that would actually have a high return on investment. But anyway, would they, for projects where an MP just stands and they're
There's a road in this country, I don't know if you've used it. You know, it's a very nice road, but the youth in the evening, if they have not put cassava along this road, there's nothing so productive. They'll come, face the backs this side. But why do this have such a good road, really? Okay.
In 2015, the World Bank came out to tell us that for each dollar invested in our country, we only yield 0.7 of a dollar. We don't actually even get back the very dollar that we've invested. So government came up with what we call the public investment management system. This has a number of phases, like I've said, the feasibility study, the cost-benefit analysis, you consult with the stakeholders, yeah? So when a project goes through this system, ideally, you should be able to answer the question of whether the project will be viable or it is not viable. You understand? So even when it comes to, say for instance, the oil roads, yeah, are they going to actually, are they going to generate the intended rate of return at the end of the day? Or are we going to be able to recover the cost of money that we've put in this road to pay back this debt at the end of the period that we are required? Or we are still going to borrow to pay back existing debt? So those questions are, we need to clearly invest, but critically looking at having our system in place, like let the system run, you know. So if you have the public investment management system in place, why should a politician or anyone stand up and say, I need a road in this area? Let the technocrats guide that, you know, we've assessed the investment environment, we need a road linking Uganda to Kenya, you know. Let such a road be the first one, the priority as a nation. Of course, roads linking various regions of the nation are good, but what should come first? Priorities first. Like we even seen our national budget. Not everything on the wishes list will make it to the budget. Why? Because of the priorities. We have a constrained resource envelope as a nation. So, of course, we've been running budget deficits over years, so there's no way you're going to have everything. There's no way you're going to have every road. So, of course, there's a whole thing over what runs the country. Is it economics? Is it politics? Yeah. So, of course, you have to put all those things in play, because even when it comes to public policy, sometimes one of the arms will override the other. But there should be a balance, at least, to show that even when this road is politically driven, are we able to actually have a financing option that will help us get the road, but also have the money back to clear the road, but also remain with our assets that will help us to finance other projects. When you look at, there has also been a number of projects in the energy sector where we've seen massive investment in the dams, you know, but we still have the cost of electricity has actually not gone down. But when you see the loan proposals in some of these projects, government is telling us that this will help us, of course, reduce the cost of of power. It will help our investors have a constant flow of power to run the various industrial parks and all that. But we've also had a problem of deemed energy as a nation, whereby we've produced the power, but we cannot evacuate it from the dam to the various centers. Now that becomes a problem. So it also becomes a question of whether we've actually planned well, because you knew when you construct a dam, you have to evacuate. But if you tell me at the end that we don't have enough infrastructure to move power from Karuma to this destination, that already shows a loophole in the system. So Uganda is not poor at frameworks or laws or policies. The whole bit comes at implementation. So that is why we need citizens on board to actually critically remind our duty bearers that, you know what, there's this framework in place, this is what it says, but we are not following this. So if we have a list of loans coming through in the budget, have we actually had the chance as civil society to critically look at all these loans and assess whether they are going to be viable to the nation? Unfortunately, no. Why? We've not had a chance to have a list of these. I've not seen that even in the background to the budget, that yes, we are going to borrow how much, we are going to roll over the debt, true, that is now the past debt, but the new borrowings, I've not seen it being broken down that if it is 20 trillion, 1 trillion is for Karuma, you know, I've not seen that in the background to the budget. So those are the questions of transparency.
Now, we are talking about civil society organizations.
Yeah.
But we know very well that government on this borrowing, these are loans approved by Parliament.
Yeah.
As civil society organizations, to what extent have you brought our political leaders? Because also sometimes they confuse us. They pass these loans, then they come and criticize them. It's like some of the taxes. You find a member of parliament, they pass these taxes, but then as traders are somewhere having issues, they're the very vocal people to speak on their behalf. So how do we bring our political leaders, but also are they privy to the information that you're seeking to have knowledge for? Or are they also taken within the same confusion by experts, by technocrats from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning and Economic Development? That also they are told, we have this loan, we need to borrow this amount of money, so we need Parliament to pass this loan. Or are they privy to this information?
Okay. So it will be a yes and a no. There are loans that we've seen whereby, of course, we as civil society, sometimes we are given privilege. There is a Committee on National Economy that critically analyzes and looks at the various loan proposals. They even make reports and present before the loans are passed. So there are those loans that you've seen, the Parliament, of course, coming up to say no, you know, to question. And some of them are counteracted, but sometimes the political arm overrides and these are passed. When you look at the famous Lubowa project, even as civil society, we as CIATINI, we have a lot of publications, we made a lot of noise, you know, we called upon the press, you know, we issued out statements on Lubowa that this may not be a viable project because of ABCD, but we still saw government still acquire this debt. To date, we still see in our national budget promissory notes being issued to pay back some of these debts based on the deliverables as they may define it. Yeah. So, but we've seen MPs themselves being denied access to such projects. But I mean, this is our money. We are paying tax, you know, and hard earned money. You know, you've seen the traders strike. You see, you've seen them complain about even things that are not taxed, like the e-freeze. Why? Because they are paying money, but their people are dying. They're not getting good services. The cost of living is becoming so high. But even their very own MP, that they had hope that he would actually represent them in Parliament or counteract such loans from being passed. The loans are being paid off. Yeah, we've not seen any progress. We do not know what is actually happening at Lubowa. Yes, and increasingly we've called upon government to actually show us, because it is our constitutional right to monitor the implementation of government programs. Yeah, and we shouldn't just come on TV or go to the media and just spread hearsay that, you know, this road is not doing well when we don't have evidence. There's no way I can talk about progress at Lubowa when I've not been.
Yes,
yes, even my own MP has been denied access to Lubowa. So that at that stage, of course, their hands are tied. Even
then
when
at that particular, let's also look at the negotiators for these loans. One time, I remember very well, I think it's when we wanted to buy our planes, the national carriers. And we reached a point and we were told we can no longer cancel, because in case we cancel, we have to pay so much for cancelling.
yeah.
But then some political analysts came out and said, but we sometimes take bad loans. We sometimes are technocrats that negotiate these loans. May not be doing us justice. I need your take on that.
Yeah, I think I've also seen the former Professor Suruma also coming out to actually testify that there are loans that they took when he was in Ministry of Finance that they shouldn't have taken. All their moves that they have taken as the ministry, like the sale of the commercial bank, you know, the Uganda bank. Yeah, so sometimes, like I've said, because he noted that they would reach there, they're taken in these nice, comfortable hotels. Then the next day, they are giving them a whole voluminous document of a loan agreement, sometimes written in a foreign language that they cannot actually understand, and they are forced to sign. Yeah, of course, now that is the role of the creditor and the role of the borrowing government, really, because now if the creditor, both the creditor and the borrower should take chance in actually. There is a slogan we have as Siatini, which is called the life before profit. Yeah, so like the life of the people of Uganda should be at the forefront. There shouldn't be a time where we are compromised to live in an inhuman state just because of the decisions that we took as a nation. So for us, increasingly, what we are saying, let the individuals in the Ministry of Finance be accountable for this, because you've taken up office. We believe you're technical. We believe you have the expertise to actually negotiate on behalf of government. Even let it be the minister himself, before he actually signs on these loans. He should be able to analyze critically. He's a landman. He's very experienced, you know. So you cannot tell me that he actually lacks the knowledge to know whether this is a bad loan or not. But also he has a whole team behind his back to actually support in critically analyzing and negotiating for some of these contracts. So it takes us back to the whole issue of creditors overriding over the borrower nations. They are taking advantage that because we need their money, yes, so they should push us to the wall to take this money. Yeah, so what we need as a nation is critically looking at our domestic revenue mobilization, like as a nation, because if we had our money, if we could fund, imagine we could fund 70% of our budget, yeah, using our own revenues, or even more, yeah, would we even be lamenting about the borrowing? Not really.
We could fund, but if we don't make proper use.
Definitely,
because
yes.
I don't want to believe that Uganda is a poor country.
That's it.
But also, what we collect, how can we ensure we make proper use of it? Because I want that one time we shall reach a point when we have maybe 70% of revenue collection, when the tax base, because day by day, URI is doing a great job. They are broadening the tax base, more per coming onto the tax radar. But the challenge is when we collect our domestic revenue,
what is it used for?
What is it used for? How do we protect what we have collected?
Yeah, because currently, I think the latest report shows that for every 100 shillings collected in Uganda, 32 are going to service the debt. 32 out of 100 shillings is going to debt servicing. So that's quite a huge chunk of money. It is crowding out other budgetary spending automatically. But why did we borrow anyway? We borrowed because we don't have the current money. Right now we don't have money, say for instance, to fund Karuma. So we borrow, but thinking that Karuma will be able to generate money to pay back that debt.
When Ugandans on the grid, they will use electricity and generate money.
Yeah, or we have more, we have constant supply.
Better industries will come and all
that's it. So, but increasingly we've seen that the projects that we've invested in have not yielded the money. As I've said, we have deemed energy, right? So that energy already you're paying it for production, but you've not evacuated it for sale. It means that there is a loophole here.
Yes.
So you're going to use the money that you've collected from other sectors or from any other performing projects
to service
the debt of such a loan. Yeah. So it calls for discipline. Fiscal discipline, like how do we, budgetary discipline, how do we ensure that the projects we are borrowing for have actually a viable rate of return on this project? But also beyond that, yes, we are expanding our tax, the tax base, but there are so many loopholes in the tax system whereby we've seen us as government lose a lot of money. When you look at local governments, they can hardly fund 5% of their budget. So the pressure still goes back to central government. Where do you expect central government to get the money? They will definitely borrow.
Partitioning all the time.
But is it actually true that local governments cannot raise their own revenues? Yeah, have you put that in question? Because increasingly we've seen today in the local governments we have what we call the IRAS, the systems that they've tried to automate the revenue collection systems. And we've seen where such systems are, there has been at least improvement in the revenue collections in areas like Gulu, the municipality, Fort Portal. Yeah, so could we have such systems rolled out in the entire nation to actually raise more revenues? Like, let us curb the revenue leakages. Yes, but not only within the nation, but also illicit finance. We've seen that many of the people, the ones in authority, laundering our money to invest elsewhere. Yeah, this is money for the people of Uganda. So if properly handled, we can be able to step up our revenue mobilization efforts. Yeah. So also there is what we call the public investment management strategy. There is a strategy that explores various financing options beyond borrowing, government lists. But of course, what is critical is domestic revenue mobilization. There is no other more reliable source of revenue than that. So if we do our part, if I pay my fair share of the taxes, so for us as Siatini, what we are saying, pay your fair share of the tax, then demand for accountability as a citizen. Critically analyze the projects and see whether they have actually yielded return. Yes. Well,
time seems to be flying. We must give room for more programming to continue. But before I let you go, and just a minute or two, what is that magic bullet that you can say, if we fire this, definitely this issue of debt burden will have managed to give it the last nail of the coffin?
I have two bullets. One, DRM, domestic revenue mobilization, is the key. Very source of financing, really sustainable. It's our own money for the people of Uganda. But now when we've collected this money, how are we utilizing it? That is the question. Bring our leaders to account. Yes, let everyone have a heart for the other, really. You don't have to keep billions of money, yet people are dying in Chirudu without medicine. We've had all these issues of drug stockouts. Why? Not because we can actually not afford as a nation, but because the few are actually taking money that are not theirs. But on the other arm, when it comes to public debt, because we may not be able to raise that revenue in a shortest time period, so with debt, let us invest money in the viable projects and follow the frameworks on debt, the rules that govern public debt, the principles of borrowing. Why should we borrow? When should we borrow? And from whom we should borrow? And also we call upon the creditors as well to do their honest part on their side. Both the borrower and the creditor, the benefit, like everyone should do their due diligence. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much. That is Hilda from Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information Negotiation Institute, Siatini. Well, quite long there. But thank you so much for your time. And of course, our viewers, thank you for being with us. Those have been with us from 6:30. We can't wait to have you tomorrow when Good Morning Uganda will be starting off to spice up your morning. And those that have gone with us all the way till now in the extension of Good Morning Uganda, which is Good Morning Uganda Extra, thank you so much. Robert Chirabo Nyonyitono, wishing you a lovely day for God and my country. Good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Juko.
Yo.
Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Hey, business people of Uganda, the Ugandan National Lottery is coming. It's the perfect opportunity to boost your business. Zimba your business by becoming an authorized Uganda National Lottery agent. By paying a security deposit of just 250,000 shillings, you will receive your very own Uganda National Lottery terminal, expert training from the pros themselves, and marketing materials to skyrocket your sales. And with a generous 5% commission on every ticket sold, the potential for earnings is limitless. Don't miss out. Act now and call us toll-free at 0800 33 44 33 to see if you qualify. Join us today and Zimba your business. Ituba Uganda is regulated by the National Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000. Or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100*21# and select daily or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
Inspiring Uganda.
More images have been coming in from the manhunt for the terrorists in the regional capital. You're looking at over a dozen security personnel gathered outside a building as gunfire broke out within. During the counter-terrorist operation, heavy military equipment was sent to the scene. This video shows an armoured personnel carrier driving through the streets of the regional capital. RT correspondent Roman Kozarev reports on the aftermath from a church that was attacked.
Well, at the moment, I'm standing right next to a church in Makhachkala. That's the regional capital here in Dagestan. One of the churches attacked on Sunday on the day of Holy Trinity. Now, one of the churches was attacked in the city of Derbent, some 150 kilometers away from Makhachkala. There, the terrorists slit the throat of a priest who's been working at the church for the last 40 years. So certainly a day of mourning for the worshippers there as well. Now, the church I'm standing next to right now in Makhachkala, now it was also attacked. Now, some media outlets have said that there are more than a dozen hostages inside this church on Sunday. However, that turned out to be false. There were people inside, but they actually barricaded themselves away from the assailants. Now, there were victims here as well. Security guard, his name is Mikhail. He was defending the worshippers. He came out here to close the door, but was shot. Nevertheless, he did manage to close it. Now it's open. You can see The door is riddled with bullets. Shots were obviously made from inside and from outside as well. And around the church, you can see shell fragments like these ones. They're absolutely everywhere here. Well, the head of the Dagestan Republic, he kind of vaguely pointed to who is to blame for these attacks. But of course, it's obvious to everybody that number one reason for terrorists is to set discord among the population here, some of whom are Muslims, Christians, Jews. Now, Republic of Dagestan is predominantly Muslim, but it's tolerant towards all religions, so that could have been the number one reasons. But the Russian State Duma deputy from Dagestan and, well, many other officials believe that the finger is pointed only in one direction.
When there was a situation at the airport in Dagestan, there was information ahead of time on Telegram channels about holding such events at the airport. But later, after the criminal case was initiated, all these Telegram channels were found to be registered on the territory of the Ukrainian Republic, on the territory of Ukraine. Against the backdrop of the successes of our troops in Ukraine, this is an attempt to rock the situation in our country from within. That's understandable. The terrorist attack is certainly under the cover of pseudo-religious slogans. All religions have coexisted and lived peacefully in Dagestan for centuries. At the same time, attacks were made on churches and synagogues. Well, it is clear that this is done to cause a clash of people over religion, knowing that all nationalities of all confessions, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, live there closely and in harmony, in peace and friendship. It is all one chain. Sevastopol and Dagestan, and there are 2 cities in Dagestan. But even if the perpetrators are in Dagestan, the chain leads to Ukraine in all these issues.
According to officials, the families of the victims will receive all the necessary, all the needed help from the government. Meanwhile, Dagestan will now observe 3 days of mourning for the victims that were killed by the terrorists.
Meanwhile, in the nearby city of Derbent, the active stage of the counter-terrorism operation has also come to an end, with 2 gunmen killed in that location. Now, groups of terrorists began their attacks in both Mahachkala and Derbent at nearly the same time. Now, the following footage gives a sense of the violence that erupted. Videos emerged on social media showing a prominent synagogue on fire. The terrorists also raided a church and killed an Orthodox priest. Authorities have declared 3 days of mourning. The terror attacks on churches and synagogues in southern Russia have sent shockwaves through the country. As more details emerge about the tragedy and its ramifications, you can find the latest updates on our website, rt.com. Now, those terrorist attacks occurred on the same day as a massive Ukrainian strike that targeted a civilian area in the southern Russian city of Sevastopol in Crimea. Authorities said 4 civilians were killed, including children, and more than 150 people were injured. The attack left handbags and children's toys scattered across the beach as locals fled the scene in panic, leaving behind their belongings. Following the tragedy, the top official in Crimea declared Monday a day of mourning. Doctors have also arrived from nearby regions to help treat the wounded. The Russian Defense Ministry said that American missiles were used in the strike, and it is common knowledge that US experts facilitate attacks with that kind of weaponry.
The Kiev regime has conducted a deliberate terrorist strike on Sevastopol using 5 American tactical ballistic attack MS missiles loaded with cluster munitions. 4 of them were intercepted, while the warhead of the 5th exploded in the air, leading to mass casualties among civilians. All flight coordinates for tactical ballistic attack MS missiles are entered by American specialists based on U.S. satellite reconnaissance.
Well, as we heard from the Russian Ministry of Defense there, these were U.S.-made ATACMS long-range missiles armed with cluster munitions aimed at a highly populated civilian area using American intelligence and targeted by American specialists. One of these missiles was able to get close enough to cause serious damage, killing 4 people, including 2 children, and injuring over 150 other people. As you could imagine, this was a day like any other, right? People went from enjoying a day on the weekend at the beach to living through a horrific nightmare in just a split second. We were able to get some reactions from people who lived through this tragic moment.
I was relaxing at a resort when I heard an explosion, then a second explosion, and a third. Something flew into the building from the sky. I went out onto the balcony to see what was going on.
Everything was covered in smoke. People were screaming. I saw something fall into the building. It was about the size of a bird. People were shouting, "You're on fire, you're on fire," from all the neighboring buildings, from the residential complex.
People ran with everything they could to put out the flames.
We were at a hotel. We heard a siren and immediately began to gather. We ran for cover, into a room. We had to run a long way, we heard a rumble, and then ran under a beam for protection. I shouted to everyone to stand under the balcony, and just then the shards began to fall.
Thank God, no one was hit. The children were all safe. Then I dropped them off at the hotel. We heard screaming. One boy was left alone in a room. I ran to him to calm him down. Then his parents came and said there were a lot of injured people on the beach. I'm a medic myself. I work in an ambulance. I ran there to the beach to see whether they needed medical help.
People went to the beach.
They helped the victims as they could. They took them